All right, another brazen theft at a San Francisco drugstore caught on video. It comes after the governor and local officials pledged to crack down on crime that has forced so many stores to close down. Our crime reporter Henry Lee joins us now live. He's at SFPD headquarters with the latest. Henry.
Yeah, it's been happening over and over, Julie. Thieves thinking they can steal things with impunity, thinking they will never get caught. This is an issue that brought a candidate for governor to San Francisco today. It's happened again. 4 women run off after stealing from the CVS pharmacy at Van Ness and Jackson in San Francisco, this time just before 6 Monday night. It's the latest grab-and-go crime in San Francisco that's forced many drugstores in the city to close. The man who took this video tells me he feels sorry for the workers who have lost their jobs or have had their hours reduced because of what he called out-of-control shoplifting. Organized retail theft has become such a hot-button issue that it's now a point of focus in the upcoming gubernatorial recall election. Former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer spoke outside the shuttered Walgreens at Larkin and Bush in San Francisco, blasting the governor.
A governor who has supported the lessening of laws when it comes to stealing items under $950, lowering those consequences.
At a news conference last week, Newsom said he signed a new law that maintains task forces across the state that crack down on retail theft. San Francisco Police Chief Bill Scott supports the legislation.
When they see these things go viral, the perception of lawlessness, the perception that anything goes, really, that has to be overcome too.
Now, three of the top cities for organized retail theft in the United States are in California. LA's number 1, San Francisco's number 5, and Sacramento is number 10. Reporting live at SFPD headquarters, Henry Lee, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
All right, Henry, thank you.
We're going to start this news hour in Afghanistan, where violence is getting more intense. Taliban fighters are moving towards big cities and provincial capitals. Government forces are struggling to push back in Kandahar, Afghanistan's second largest city. There have been a series of rocket attacks on the main airport, and flights in and out have been suspended. Hundreds of military commandos have been deployed to Herat in the west. There's heavy fighting outside that city. But the situation is particularly bad in Lashkar Gah, the capital of Helmand province. There, the Afghan Air Force is being blamed for bombing a hospital. The city of 200,000 people is in a real danger of falling to the Taliban. Charlotte Bellis has more from Kabul.
Heavy fighting in and around 3 major cities in Afghanistan. In Lashkar Gah, the capital of Helmand province, fighting started on Saturday when the Taliban entered this city. Residents said they could see the Taliban moving street to street, getting closer to the heart of the city until Afghan special forces entered. And since that time, they said they've just heard heavy gunfire and also airstrikes from Afghan Air Force and also from the United States, peppering around the outskirts of the city there. Communications have been cut off in Lashkar Gah. It's incredibly hard to get information in and out of the city and for residents to feel secure not knowing what is going on around them. In Kandahar city, the second biggest city in Afghanistan, also heavy fighting. Journalists there telling us they've heard constant gunfire for about 24 hours inside the city. The airport there was damaged by a rocket attack. Civilian flights were stopped, but they hope to resume them on Monday. But also US airstrikes and Afghan Air Force striking there to support their military on the ground. And thirdly, in Herat city in the west, that is looking a little bit better from the government's perspective. They've managed to retake control from the Taliban. They sent in reinforcements and they've managed to push the Taliban out further and re-secure the airport, allowing flights to resume for residents there. Now, President Ghani held a cabinet meeting where he talked about the security situation evolving. He said he doesn't believe that the Taliban are interested in peace and that securing cities are their priority.
Well, the Taliban has taken more territory in recent weeks than it did at any time since it fell from power 20 years ago. In May, it controlled about 20% of Afghanistan, but as US and other troops have been withdrawing, it seized the opportunity to ramp up its offensive. Within 2 months, half of the country has fallen under Taliban rule. The Afghan government is now facing a critical test as the fighters advance and surround the capital, Kabul. Viktor Yurosevich is a medical coordinator at the Emergency Surgical Center for War Victims in the center of Lashkar Gah. He says he hopes the neutrality of his facility will keep his team out of the conflict.
The situation in Lashkar city itself, security widely tolerated mostly since last 3 days, especially yesterday in the afternoon when we are seeing open clashes inside the city, close to the city center. We received 20 patients, mostly civilians, 9 patients arrived as dead on arrival, and all the city is now blocked. And we cannot predict the dynamics of the next days, even hours. Different variety of injuries. We have mine, shell, bullet. So all of them are both wounded. We had to narrow down criteria of admissions. Now we are taking only life-threatening conditions. So we only admit for the life-saving surgeries, as our bed occupancy reached more than 90%. And in this case, we need to narrow criteria just for the life-saving procedures. We have a stock for 3.5 months of all supplies, except of critical items that we try to get from our center in Kabul. Now, of course, with communication and transportation that is cut off, is going to be an issue in the next days as well. In this moment, there are no any tensions around the facility itself. Our main goal is neutrality. So we treat everybody as same. We don't ask questions. We don't ask who is from which party. And we hope this neutrality will help us survive in the next period.
The rising department of certain registrations and for other purposes.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
I yield to the gentlewoman from Indiana, Orlowski, for 2 minutes.
Gentlewoman from Indiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, gentlemen, for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today once again to stand for life and to prevent American taxpayers from paying for abortion services overseas. Americans should never be forced to fund abortions against their conscience, period. I've long supported the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits taxpayer funding from paying for abortions domestically. Yesterday, I proudly spoke in support of this key pro-life protection, which the Democrats stripped from these appropriation packages. Now Democrats are trying to force Americans to foot the bill for abortions abroad. For decades, the Helms Amendment has prohibited abortion services from being included in our nation's foreign aid. Driven by a radical agenda, Democrats and the Biden administration have removed this long-standing, common-sense prohibition from the state and foreign operations bill on the floor today. To make it clear, congressional Democrats and the Biden administration are trying to force the American taxpayer to fund abortions in foreign nations. The facts are on our side. 77% of Americans oppose using taxpayer dollars for this purpose. It is deeply disappointing, but not surprising, that Democrats are continuing to attack our pro-life values and Americans' fundamental conscious rights. Taxpayers in Indiana and around the country should never be forced to bankroll abortion services here and at home. And we most certainly should not be forced to bankroll abortions abroad. This is a dangerous path of destruction. I urge my colleagues to oppose the bill, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Kentucky reserves.